it.
Okay, guys, in a few seconds, we're going to be going live. I'll let you know when we're going live.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, guys, we're live.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Hello, and welcome to another episode of Police Off the Cuff After Hours. My name is Mark DeMeo. I'm your host, my co-host in all things law enforcement. What's up, Bill Cannon?
I'm very excited to have these two left coast guests, West Coast, I meant. These guys are actually Republicans. I don't know how a Republican ever got elected district attorney in LA County, though. That must have been the perfect storm, Steve.
Okay, so
Yeah,
wait, before we start,
quiet.
let me introduce you guys. It's you know, we do the show here in New York, and most of our episodes have to deal with New York, and we've been expanding. So just on behalf of Bill and I just want to tell you how excited we are to have you, because you're both from LA, Los Angeles County, and you both work there. Greg Meyer, you were an LAPD captain, and your last assignment was the police academy, which I want to talk to you a little bit about. I think that's really, really interesting. And Steve Cooley, you were the LA County DA, and you wrote a couple of books now, and Greg helped you out on there. Greg is an expert in all things law enforcement. And Bill read the books cover to cover, right, Bill?
Yeah. I will when I get them, but I didn't actually. But the books sound amazing, especially they're so relevant to what's going on right now. And
one of the books is called Blue Lives in Jeopardy, and the other book is called Blue Lives Matter in the Line of Duty. They're part of a Blue Lives series of books, and one of the authors is Steve, right, Steve?
Right. Myself and Bob Shern, we co-authored the books. Blue Lives Matter in the Line of Duty was the first book. The second book was Blue Lives in Jeopardy, when the badge becomes the target.
And these books basically deal with the killing of an assassination of police officers.
That's correct. It's all murders of law enforcement officers in Los Angeles County over the years, and we've selected them based upon the notoriety and the unique facts of the cases. And then we brought in Greg Meyer, renowned use of force police tactics expert, to write a lessons learned component at the end of each chapter of the book.
you know, Steve, that is so important. And maybe I could also address this to Greg, the lessons learned, because I was in homicide for my last 10 years on the job. And at the end of a case, it's probably always a good idea, whether the case is solved or unsolved, to do a critique on the things that you did right and the things that you did wrong, so that you don't repeat what you did wrong the next time, you know, because it's always a learning experience. And as Greg, you know, and Steve, you know, homicide is a team sport. There's no single superstar that's going out there, even though, you know, you watch these shows on Investigation Discovery. I have one guy in mind who's personally solved 400 murders, which is now bullshit. But it's always good. And I really enjoyed the fact that you guys critique what you do and lessons learned. Could you speak a little bit about that, Greg?
Well, Greg, I wanted what he was asking you basically. Could you talk to us about the 40 years of experience that you had with the? Because you worked especially with the tactics and arresting and use of force, and you're an expert on that. And you were the captain of the police academy, and now we're going through a time right now where, even as Bill always mentions. Talk about the compression on the back, Bill.
Well, I don't know if you guys saw the diaphragm laws that the New York City Council just came up with. Out now, just absolutely ridiculous. You want to speak to that, Greg?
Yeah, it's a little crazy. Let me just mention, I was 30 years with LAPD. I do use of force expert witness work all over the country. I've done that for quite a few years, even before I retired, as Mark was captain at the Los Angeles Police Academy. That's because Bill Bratton, who you all know very well, was our chief at the time, and he decided to put me back in the academy because he thought I needed more training, I guess. I had the opportunity to do that job for a year and a half. And of course, the tactics training is part of any police academy. As one of you mentioned, it's as Bill mentioned, it's so important to learn the lessons after any given incident so that we don't keep making the same mistakes. I just want to give you a quote from a close friend of mine from tactics from the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, retired expert that some of your audience will know his name also. He says, "We dishonor the fallen if we ignore the lessons that
Your sound is cutting out.
Try it again, Greg.
Yeah, Greg, you might want to log off and log back on again.
dishonor the fallen if we ignore the lessons that will." Yeah, give me 1 second here.
All right, so while we're on hold right now, Steve, how did you come to work with Greg?
Well, I knew Greg when he was a police officer, and then I was the district attorney for Los Angeles County from 2000 to 2012. Obviously, we had a lot of officer involved use of force cases, and Greg was the person we went to both when he was with LAPD and after to give us a fair and honest and objective assessment of what certain conduct was or wasn't from the standpoint of a potential jury trial or making a decision on filing or not filing a case. You need
Were you the DA with Rodney King?
No, that was before my time. That was back in the early 90s. I was elected in 2000.
Right.
And then I served 3 terms. I retired in 2012.
Well,
But
Greg
I
is,
was expert witness in the Rodney King case for the city way back when.
yeah, that's what I read that in the notes. You were the, and also the other case that was a very famous case with on the train station, right? Johannes.
Yeah, I was an expert witness for the officer, Johannes Mesterly in Oakland, the BART system, the train system shooting that happened in the 1st of January 2009, and he got prosecuted for first-degree murder. It was a crazy, politically, racially charged case. He was ultimately found guilty of manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter. And this was one of the many cases that are out there where an officer mistakenly draws their gun and shoots somebody when they're actually in their mind, they're trying to draw their taser. There's been 17 or 18 of those cases around the country. Only 2 of them have been criminally charged, and the BART tragedy was one of them.
What was the outcome of that case?
The officer was found guilty not of murder, but of involuntary manslaughter, which in California basically means an accidental death with some negligence. And it definitely was not a murder. He definitely had no intention of shooting the person.
All right,
in the
since
heat of
listen,
battle of trying to subdue this guy, he was trying to draw his taser, and he drew his gun, unfortunately.
Since we both have you here right now, Steve, you're the DA. And Greg, you are the captain of the police academy in charge of training. and we are going through what's actually going on today. We have bail reform. We have police officers. What are you teaching in the academy? What are you doing about bail reform? If you had to deal with these fellas, these two issues, what would you be doing right now?
Well, this is Steve Cooley, and I have observed the bail reform efforts in other jurisdictions using algorithms and other such mechanisms, New Jersey, New York, and elsewhere. From what I understand, it's generally been a failure. I would put much more faith in an adversary proceeding where a judge decides according to traditional bail rules. Last time I looked, bail was still in the US Constitution. Algorithms weren't. So LA and California are moving towards a no bail system. However, the bail industry is fighting it, and there will be an initiative on the ballot to essentially overrule the Chief Justice's decision to kind of impose it through the courts, and the decision of some others in the justice system to have it be the system whereby people are evaluated as to whether they should be let out on bail or not, and how much. And I trust the adversary system, DA, defense attorney, judge, input, decision, according to rules.
Steve, isn't it also,
not some algorithm or some bureaucrat?
but Steve, isn't it also an ideology? Because I think what one side is trying to empty the prisons and the jails because they think it's unjust, and the other side, I think that's just lunacy. That the one side doesn't recognize the danger of having criminals out on the street, unmonitored, undisciplined, unwatched, and it's just they think it's just
and unlikely to appear in court. Yes, it's part of the decarceration movement. There is a decarceration movement that is an ideology. It's adopted by a lot of left-wing elected officials, certainly the George Soros type people would support that. I think anyone with real experience in the justice system and public safety would reject it on its face.
it's pretty
It doesn't work.
disturbing when you see what's happening in New York City right now. I mean, I came on the police department in 1985, and CompStat started in around 1990, and every year they lowered crime, every single year, to the point they lowered it 70% in 30 years. And now they're going to give it back in 2 or 3 years. It's unbelievable.
Well, when I was the DA of LA County, we had the lowest crime rate year after year after year, lowest crime rate in 60 years. And that's because we were putting the right people in prison for the right amount of time. The system was working and selecting those who should be on probation and those that should be in prison. And now California, with Governor Brown, Newsom, our majority Democrat state legislature, we're definitely moving away quickly from those safe days. We're going to have a public safety crisis here in California. In fact, we already have one. It's just going to get worse and worse. No doubt about it.
Across the country, what I'm seeing here the last couple of months is with respect to police tactics and training, I'm seeing several things, and a lot of them are not good. You're having decisions being made by politicians and activists, politicians that are sympathetic to the activists, and between them, they have no idea how police work is done. And history is repeating itself in several ways. You go back into the early 1980s in Los Angeles, in LAPD, rotted control hold was a regularly used tactic. The guy was fine. But in May of 1982, the politicians ordered the police department to stop doing that immediately, and to officers, because now they're using their nightsticks. Now they're using karate kicks. We had some tasers, but not enough to go around in those days. And so the injuries just absolutely skyrocketed. All right, so we get used to that. 9 years later, along comes Rodney King on the videotape, and everybody goes, oh my God, how did that happen? If Rodney King had had a carotid hold put on him when he started resisting, you would have never heard the name Rodney King. There would not even have been a videotape. It would have been over. He would have been in the backseat of the police car before the man across the street ever cranked up the video camera. So here we are, New York and other places, many other places around the country are saying, okay, take away the carotid control hold. Well, I'm saying, been there, done that. Get ready for more injuries to your officers. Get ready for more injuries to their suspects. And that's not what's intended, but the decisions are being made by people who absolutely have no idea how to subdue someone. And now you mentioned the diaphragm law in New York that just got signed. I mean, I've been following that very closely. That is totally irresponsible. How in the heck are you going to subdue someone who wants to resist you that has to be taken to the ground, or someone that fights you that has to be taken to the ground? If you can't put your knee on his back or his butt or any of the pressure points without
Greg.
you being criminally charged, that's
Well,
crazy.
Greg,
You might as well just let the guy go.
I think it comes back to the bigger picture of what we've been seeing probably for a couple of years now is the war on police. There is definitely, we were discussing it. It started in New York when the guy poured the bucket of water on the cop, and
Oh,
the
yeah.
things they've been getting away with. And it's just, there is recognizably, and not just in New York, but nationally, a war on the police. And
Yeah.
using force is like, it's like a dirty word. And policing is a contact sport, but the public doesn't want to see the contact, but they just want the results. They want the arrest. They want a safe environment, but they don't want to see the contact, which brings us to maybe more non-lethal devices.
Hey, Greg, speaking of non-lethal devices, the other day I saw a video. It was in New York City. In New York City, it was at a protest, and they were after some guy. The taser came out right away, which was interesting because it kind of sort of ended the whole physical confrontation. As the guy ran away, as soon as the officer was going to put his hands on him and try to subdue him, instead of that, he just hit him with the taser, and the guy fell, and they were able to cuff him. So my point is, you're an expert on tasers. You did that for your whole career, even getting shot with the taser on a number of occasions I read. But do you think that's going to happen, that we're going to go to the taser right away now?
Yeah, I don't know. You're probably going to go, if you're not going to have a situation where it's safe, because you'll get criminally charged if you do it, to take somebody to the ground and put your knee on their butt or their back while you're handcuffing them, which is the standard way of doing it. Maybe they will automatically go to more tasers, but still, when you're getting the person handcuffed while they're down, how are you going to control them? Because the taser is not going to be on the whole time. It's very, very challenging to try to picture what it's going to look like to control someone on the ground if you can't put a knee or any kind of pressure on their back or their butt or anything like that. It's kind of a ridiculous policy, or now I guess it's a law. I'd hate to be the first guy that tries to do that, and then some prosecutor says, "Oh, or you're violating the new law." It's also, parenthetically, it's hard for me to see any prosecutor with a reasonable brain actually charging an officer with doing that.
They already have the first guy.
Oh,
An
was
officer
that
was arrested
right?
for putting a guy in a chokehold, and the guy was a career criminal, and he got arrested again a few days later.
Wow.
I
Wow.
think it's a fair assessment right now in contemporary America that you have a lot of lousy chief prosecutors. And I can name the jurisdictions if you wish. There's one or two back in New York and a couple of boroughs there. St. Louis, the person's contemplating filing weapons charges against the people defending their home. Fulton County, Atlanta, that guy is dumb as a rock. Chicago, if you ever hear her speak, she doesn't know what she's doing. There are some Philadelphia, they're falling apart with that defense-oriented, left-wing, ideological Nimrod being their chief prosecutor. And the crime is going up in all those places. They are
Steve,
not real
go back to the couple. Steve, go back to the couple that tried to defend their property. How can they charge them when that is in the law as part of justification?
You can't. And how did they get a search warrant for
That I don't
weapons?
understand either. Don't you need probable cause for a search warrant? What judge signed that? Judge Wapner?
Well, you need an affidavit of opinion to make a statement of probable cause that is true. And if those guns are, they can easily be determined if they're lawfully possessed, there's no grounds to seize them at all. So you got a screwed up prosecutor. I briefly heard her speak. She doesn't know what she's doing. And you apparently have a judge that bought into it. But boy, I would not want to be living in St. Louis. That's the way they do things back there, or Philadelphia, and a couple of boroughs in New York. And, just some places in California aren't too hot either.
Well, Vance is no bargain in New York either. Vance is a carpetbagger on the state.
He doesn't strike me, but how about, is there a weird guy in Brooklyn too that sort of a Soros kind of guy?
Yep.
Well, that's not good. It's not good.
No.
You never have to wonder where Steve Cooley stands on these issues. I'll tell you that.
That's why I was elected by the landslide over and over again.
Steve, how did you ever get elected to 3 terms in California being a Republican? How did that happen?
In California, district attorney is a nonpartisan race by law. So even though some people will try and make a partisan race, the voters generally figure out who the most qualified candidate is. I ran against a very famous DA named Gil Garcetti, and I just clobbered him. I slaughtered him. Worst landslide against an incumbent in the history of the LA County DA's office. I was very proud of that. I wanted 2 more landslides because we did a good job. And that's how you should measure that kind of a job is, are they doing a good job or not? And then vote for them or against them. But when you politicize a prosecutorial office or a police agency, that is a downhill direction. You don't want to go there. And my opponent, Gil Garcetti, spent a couple $1 million calling me a Republican, trying to win it that way. He got his ass kicked.
Hey, didn't you go up against Kamala Harris?
Yeah, for Attorney General. I actually won that election on election night. And then when they got through counting what they call provisional ballots, I lost in every single county.
Oh, those old Democrat mail-in ballots?
Well, no, they're actually, you drop them off at the end. They aren't even mailed in. They come in the day of the election. They're dropped off, and then they're counted if a race is close. Ours was close, and she just killed me in every county on provisional vote. So I actually won that. And if it would have been a regular, an honest election, you wouldn't have to deal with her as a potential vice presidential candidate.
Steve didn't mention the district attorney in Nashville, Tennessee, but he should be on that list too. I'm currently involved in the defense of a young officer charged with first-degree murder in Nashville. He's chasing a suspect down the street. The suspect has a gun in his hand. He switches it to his other hand. They're running. He's turning on the officer. The officer is yelling, "Stop or I'll shoot, stop or I'll shoot." He turns on the officer again and the officer shoots him. And in Nashville, they're prosecuting that kid for first-degree murder. Now, there is something really wrong, but here's the other thing. You have case after case. I mean, I know a lot of your audience follows these things. We've gotten to the point in this country in many places, case after case, where the police or the sheriff shoots somebody who's got the gun in their hand. And they think, oh, well, the police should have talked him out of it or something.
It's
The
unbelievable.
police should have talked him out of it. They should, I mean, it's crazy.
So do these officers take a judge trial because the juries are that stupid? The officers
Well,
involved
I'm
in
not
the
sure.
cases.
I'm not,
in Baltimore, the officers took bench trials and they were generally acquitted,
Right.
which I thought was a pretty smart move under the circumstances. But the really dumb move was the state's attorney in that particular county that governs Baltimore, even bringing charges. It was a response without proper investigation or analysis. And the DA's office, or whatever they're called back in Baltimore, had their ass handed to them because they were not professional. They were responding to political pressure, which is the worst, most unethical thing a prosecutor can do. And that state's attorney in Baltimore, I'll say it right now, she can sue if she wants, unethical, unprofessional, and should be tossed out of office. Doesn't deserve to be called a prosecutor.
It seems like they're activists and not prosecutors. You know, they're political activists.
Political activists with ideologies, and they're weak and unprincipled because they react to political or public pressure. It's supposed to be about the law and the facts. It's that simple, and they don't get it. And it's all over Chicago. Jesse Smollett, whatever his name is, that DA, dumb as a rock. Her name is Fox or something. Dumb as a rock. But she reacted and gave in to her political whims, and I think some political pressure to not pursue him for filing a false police report and all the rest of the stuff he did.
And it also was a report that causes tension between the races because he was claiming, racial bias and a bias attack against himself. He made the whole thing.
And all sorts of negative collateral consequences. Plus, the Chicago Police Department probably spent hundreds of thousands of dollars sorting out his false claims because they were under pressure to do so, and they did a good job. The person who failed back there was their public prosecutor. She's the failure.
It's unbelievable.
And that's the second largest jurisdiction in the United States of America. Los Angeles is the largest by far, but Cook County, Chicago, that's number 2. And they're led by someone who really is not qualified or well suited to be a public prosecutor.
Right. I mean, you always think the wisdom is within the law, that the law will solve all incompetence and all bias, but it's just not true. You know,
it's whoever's wielding the power of the law. It's whoever's making the decisions. And if this country starts getting a whole lot of George Soros puppet prosecutors, you can forget the law and you can forget the facts. You're going to see an ideologically driven executive prosecutorial power being turned over to the wrong people. It's an incredibly powerful position.
yes.
You want the right people in there. You don't want a George Soros puppet. No way.
Very disturbing. Do you guys want to touch upon? I know the one book, The Blue Lives Matter, examines 8 line of duty murders of police officers. Steve, would you maybe comment on? There's the book right there, Blue Lives Matter in the Line of Duty. Would you maybe comment on one of those cases and involve Greg in how he re-examined the case and lessons learned, that whole type of thing?
Yeah, I like to have Greg do it as a very objective observer because he read through all the 8 chapters, and I like to have Greg take that on. Then I'd like to talk about the second book, Blue Lives in Jeopardy, and what we were trying to accomplish with that book. But Greg, why don't you take a chapter from Blue Lives Matter?
Sure. We have, again, these are hard because officer got murdered. Usually about one officer a week is murdered in this country, unfortunately, in recent years. By the way, there's already, as of this morning, there's already been 30 officers murdered in the line of duty so far this year, just through this morning. And that's a 7% increase over last year on the same day. So, rest in peace. But we've got to learn the lessons of how these officers die and how we can train against it and instill good work habits in people. Because frankly, most of our officers die for the same reasons over and over. And not all of them are preventable, but many of them are preventable. Here's an example. We have an officer working alone in the middle of the night in a commercial area, a closed down factory area, basically. There's little traffic or legitimate activity. He's just driving down the road. He sees 2 men and a woman walking in this closed area, and he decides to stop and investigate. He did not radio in his location or why he was stopping them. He did not request a backup unit. And he picked one of the male suspects out to do a frisk search, a cursory search for weapons. For reasons we cannot know, the officer was either unaware of, or he allowed the killer and the killer's girlfriend to walk up on him while he was searching the other guy. And of course, the killer just walked up to the officer and killed him with 1 shot to the head. Now it got solved because the girlfriend got nervous and started talking to people and all that. But it's like, you can't do that, guys. Basic tactics. You're stopping somebody, you're by yourself, you're stopping somebody, you got to let communications know what you're doing and where you are. And maybe before you even stop 3 people, when you're by yourself in the middle of the night, maybe you need to radio in and say, hey, send me a cover unit, a backup unit,
Right.
so that we can take care of business here. That's just, one of many examples of how we lose an officer tragically and maybe unnecessarily. And it's what these books are about, is we get right down into the nitty gritty, thanks to Steve Cooley and Bob Shern, the primary authors, intense research and writing. We get right down into the details of how the incident happened. Details that nobody's going to read in a newspaper or
Right.
see on the TV news when they talk about the officer getting killed. And then we look at, okay, what could have been done different to save that life? And that's what these books are all about, is trying to save the lives of officers while they're out there doing that increasingly dangerous job. And I'll tell you, it is increasingly dangerous. Just like violent crime is going up all over the big cities in Minneapolis, and all the demonstrations and burning police cars and burning police buildings and attacking officers. Violent crime is going up, in New York better than I do. I mean, it's up 2.5 times the same period last year, the number of shootings and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I'm afraid that it also means that more and more officers are being attacked, and we're going to lose more and more officers as a result of what's going on here. So we really got to be on guard for it and be as tactically proficient as we can.
Yeah, and the second book is called Blue Lives in Jeopardy, When the Badge Becomes the Target. This is because we wrote this book because we saw a trend where officers were being essentially assassinated and in some cases executed. Every one of the chapters in Blue Lives in jeopardy and the bad becomes a target involves the execution of an officer who is caught off guard, unprepared, or exercising bad tactics, or they're just assassinated. And we saw that trend throughout the country, and we saw examples of it in Los Angeles County. So that book focuses on that particular aspect of the murders of police officers. In many of the cases, the officers, in fact, in most of the cases in the chapters in that book, the officers never got their gun out of their holster.
Well, it's happened in New York. The most recent was Mia Sosa's Familia in
Yes.
the Bronx, and she was executed. And then Wen Jen Lu and was it
Yeah.
Lopez was I forget the other officer's name, but out and out assassinations of police officers. This was things that were happening
There
in
was
the
a recent
60s.
one. There was a
What's that?
recent one. Cop went to a domestic violence call just last week and was ambushed. As soon as he got out of the car, they ambushed him. There was an assassination. There was no call there.
This is the same, this is what I was saying about the same things keep happening. History keeps repeating itself. I mean, you guys in NYPD know, and I know clear over here on the left coast, in the early 1970s, I think it was in NYPD, 2 officers at once. And
ELA.
you've seen it since then. These are tough. We've just got to keep teaching our people and our new people.
Hey, let me ask Steve. Now that we're getting into this, the federal government said they were going to make Antifa.
We need to
I'm
not
sorry.
forget the lessons.
You guys okay?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, Steve, about now I lost my train of
Antifa?
Antifa.
About the federal
Oh,
government.
federal government. Now I think they're probably waiting on BLM too. They're probably going to make them. That my idea is that they're looking to make them both terrorist organizations and attack them that way. Arrest them federally. Now you were a prosecutor. What is actually the difference between, because you talk about all these horrible prosecutors, they're not going to do the job. So that's where the federal government has to step in and I guess take care of these people. What's the difference there?
Well, first of all, I beg to differ with you between Antifa and BLM. I think they're 2 different kinds of organizations. Antifa is clearly made up of terrorists who enjoy and organize and conspire to commit violence against others. This is their raison d'etre. Now, the Black Lives Matter group, that's a communist organization. They self-admit that. The founders of the National Black Lives Matter movement say they are trained Marxists, and this is sort of like their job and their avocation. I think that they, at this point, because they probably have some unwitting followers and believers who just sort of believe in the cause, self-flagellation or their guilt trips or whatever, I don't think that can be characterized as a terrorist organization, at least.
Listen, I wasn't saying that was my opinion. What I was saying was that I have an idea, like the federal government is waiting for a couple of homicides that they could attach to BLM, and then they could put them in that category as well. That's just thinking the way the federal government acts. I don't have an opinion on it.
The federal government, U.S. attorneys, and federal law enforcement agencies have a lot of powerful tools they can use against those kinds of groups, especially when they operate well beyond the normal jurisdiction of a local prosecutor.
That's my point. In order to
Right.
prosecute it and shut, obviously, Antifa down, and then if there's a lot of violence that they can attached to BLM, it would probably like to do the same thing. Use
Well,
those
they got
federal.
to treat them like gangs. They've done
Yeah.
a pretty good job going after some of the international gangs that maybe came from LA but end up in Virginia. They're pretty good at that. So treat them like gangs or organized crime.
Well, how about
Racketeering.
how about using the RICO statute?
Yeah, RICO, obviously, racketeer and influence corrupt organizations. That's what they are. They commit multiple felonies in the furtherance of a grand conspiracy. Those are powerful laws, and the feds know how to use it. And at least now we don't have some screwed up people at the top of the FBI. And you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I think we have some legitimate, honest leadership now that aren't on some political agenda. So yeah, I'd like to see the feds, all their different agencies, ATF, ICE, FBI, all do their thing, and
Well,
hopefully,
Steve, how does local law enforcement stand by and watch them rip down statues and just let them do it? How is that okay?
I don't get it either. That's a crime. It's called vandalism. When a crime is in progress, you as a law enforcement officer are supposed to stop it. The only thing I can think of is one, either they're getting the wrong signs from their political leadership to stand down, go light, do whatever, let it burn, we'll fix it later kind of stuff. That could be part of it. And the other part is the cops are just outnumbered, and tactically it's too dangerous to move in. And that's a possibility. They're just outnumbered.
Well, Steve,
so I like to talk about that.
All the tools that the NYPD has learned in disorder control, there was a chief named Louis Anamone. I don't know if you remember him, but he was a real hard-charging chief. He was one of the biggest experts in disorder control in the world. And when he looked at this, we spoke to him about this. They have the ability to knock it down. They have the tools. They didn't use drones. They didn't use helicopters. They didn't use horses. What are you keeping all the tools in the garage? This is game day. Let's use all the tools at our disposal. Where's the investigative element?
I think you may be right, especially the horses. Those are really effective.
The horses and crowds, that's what horses are for.
I know. Great. We got plenty of them out here.
And as far as drones, when the riots first started, they were occupying the police in one area and then breaking into stores in another area. Drones could have followed these people. And but if you don't use them, no one's going to know, Aviation could have followed them. They never had aviation up during these riots.
Well, there's been a lot of efforts here in Los Angeles County to put huge restrictions and controls on law enforcement's use of drones. And I think law enforcement has said, look, we don't want to interfere with anyone's privacy rights or any of those concerns. But we do want to use this as an effective tool. But they're constantly battling, the left-wing elements, the ACLU, all those guys, to try and use a tool that can help in the pursuit of public safety. But it's a fight. It's a fight all the time just to do the right thing.
Look, Google doesn't want law enforcement to use facial recognition. So there's other companies that will allow law enforcement to use it. We don't have to get it from Google. We'll get it from some other companies.
Well, Google Google likes to do a lot of things that benefit Google. And they really ought to be a little more public safety oriented and responsive. And don't protect terrorists, which they have done. They have protected the information on a terrorist cell phone just to have control over their data. Well, some point in time, that has to give way to public safety. I'm sorry, Google, that's kind of the way it works. At some point in time, you get a warrant, you give it up.
Well, Apple did the same thing until the FBI figured out how to get the information from the phone without Apple.
Yeah, Apple, Google. And then the only thing that makes me laugh, though, is how periodically they get hit, like Twitter got hit yesterday. You know what? Then they cry for the FBI to come and solve their crime because they've been victimized.
That's right.
Twitter got hacked by some hackers. I guess they paid somebody on the inside of Twitter to give them access to a bunch of people.
Oh yeah, Obama and Bloomberg and a bunch of other. Well,
What do you do when you're a prosecutor and they pass laws that tie your hands, that handcuff you?
well, you join with other prosecutors, and hopefully you have enough influence and sway with the state legislature to fix things. But that has not been the case in California for some time. We've not had a really a great governor in the state for many, many years, and the legislature's a super majority. So it's just hard for prosecutors now. But some crisis will occur, and maybe those dumbos will wake up and do the right thing. That's how it has to happen.
You know what's
Or
funny
the
that you mentioned that, Steve?
Pardon me?
You know what's funny that you mentioned that a crisis has to occur. So we're seeing crime going up in all these neighborhoods, and like for example in New York City, the shootings that have gone up. The people that have been killed overwhelmingly are people of color. So let's say it was like 95% black deaths, including a 1-year-old, and the other 5% was Hispanic. So, and these deaths are basically, they're mounting. And in New York City, we have, I've seen this cycle several times now, where there's one murder that happens where, okay, that's enough. We have to do something about it now. And most of the time that murder is a white person. So this whole argument right now, we should be attacking this right now before more Black lives are lost.
Well, I think maybe some of the leaders in the Black community should take that torch and run with it. I don't know if you heard the grandmother and the father of the 1-year-old who was shot and killed in New York.
Yeah.
Before yesterday, they were eloquent in saying this has got to stop. The grandmother said, "Hey, babies' lives matter."
Yeah.
And that's the message that has to go out. Chicago's a killing field. Heard someone call it Chicago is like a circular firing squad with the deaths, all the shootings and all the deaths, 64 shootings, 16 deaths in 1 week, over and over and over again. This is a serious problem, but I think people like the grandmother, the 1-year-old, have to keep getting the message out. Stop killing our babies. Stop killing them.
Well,
Stop
Steve,
killing
also,
others.
Steve, you mentioned Chicago, and Chicago has the strictest gun laws in the nation. How's that working out for them?
They're trying to come up with new gun legislation now.
Yeah.
This week, they want to come up with new gun legislation.
Well, no. Well, let's not go. We can talk about that all day long too. Let's talk about the police stuff. But
well,
crazy. It's
my
crazy.
point, Lewis, you remember in New York City, we had Dinkins as a mayor, and that's when it was just like it's beginning to be now. Every day the homicides coming on the news and reporting these horrible deaths, and most of the time it took place in the minority communities. And then all of a sudden, this couple comes here from Utah to go to the U.S. Open, and it's a family. Watkins was their name. And somebody tries to rip off the mother's purse. The son steps in, gets stabbed right in the stairwell of the subway. And that was it. That was it. We got to change it. And then after that point, everything changed. Like, enough is enough. And that's my point. It's like, why can't we do something now before it gets freaking crazy again? Why do we let this happen? And I'm talking not we, but the elected officials.
How about get rid of your mayor for starters? He's a loser. He's an embarrassment.
I don't know
and
how to do that. How do you do that?
He's not public safety oriented. He's anti a police officer. That's clear.
Yeah.
That's clear. We know which side he's on. Get rid of him. They got rid of some other bad guys. They got Giuliani in there way back when. And he and Bratton did a pretty good job straightening things out. And it went from Washington was the murder capital of the United States. Then it was New York was the murder capital of the United States. Then it was Los Angeles, the murder capital of the United States. And things happened for them to lose that title. In California, it was tough laws, 3 strikes law, tough prosecutors, a lot of laws against gangs. That's how our murder rate went way, way down, about 300%. 300%.
But you know something, Steve, in New York, these politicians are so nuts that they don't even want the police department tracking gangs. Like keeping, you keep a dossier on gangs.
Right.
They don't want them doing that. These people are out of their mind.
They made him dilute the whole database, the gang database.
Well, we've got a guy running for DA in LA County right now. His name is George Gascon. He's a George Soros puppet, put up by George Soros, and he'll get a lot of money from Soros. That guy has said when he becomes LA County DA, no death penalty. They're going to eliminate the hardcore gang division, which is really big and tough and good and successful. Eliminate them. And also, he's not going to enforce any of the gang enhancement laws that we all fought so hard to get appropriate sentence for gang members. So you watch LA, if this guy gets in, you can just kiss us goodbye. Kiss us goodbye. We will once again be the murder capital of the United States.
Well, is that because it's an elected position that you'll basically give away the farm just to get in office?
No. Most of our elected DAs have been really good DAs. And the last thing you want in LA County is to have the DA appointed by the Board of Supervisors, because basically nowadays they're kind of so left wing. You'd end up with someone just like George Gascon. You're better off having the people elect their sheriff and elect their DA, because at least then, once in a while, they can use the ballot box to get rid of the bad ones and get in the good ones.
The amazing,
Go ahead,
I say the amazing thing in Los Angeles County is we have a wonderful DA for the past almost 8 years. She replaced Steve Cooley. She's female, she's Black, and she's a tough prosecutor. And you've got this outsider coming in trying to knock off a female Black. I mean, it's totally ironic given everything that's going on in the country here.
I know, right? You figure
Amazing. It's just amazing.
Well, in New York City, one of the perfect storm is that they just got rid of anti-crime, which is probably the toughest unit the NYPD has. Every single precinct in the city had an anti-crime unit. They're the ones that go out after the guns, the street robberies, the assaults on the street. They just disbanded them. Uniformed cops are not they don't have the time to go, 8-9 hours in a tour going for guns, doing car stops, that type of thing. So people aren't afraid to carry guns right now. So that's why there's going to be so much more, a disrespect on the street now into a shooting where maybe, someone would have to go home to get their gun. Now they're carrying it on them. So that little bump into someone, oh, there's the guy that dissed me last week, I'm going to shoot him. Because anti-crime is the unit that kept these people from carrying guns. And now it's chaos. It's not going to happen,
Yeah, chaos.
Stop, question, and frisk. I will admit, as a New York City retired sergeant, that was overused. It was totally overused. And you know what they say, you overuse it, you lose it. And that's what happened because they made it a numbers game, But stop, question, and frisk is so damn important, especially in getting guns off the street,
You know what? I've been asking our guests this. I think it's a very important question. So, Steve and Greg, where would you move right now? You could pick a place. Where would you move?
I need to go to a state that doesn't have state income taxes. That would
I got to do that too. I got to do that.
But then it'd be somewhere where the crime rate's real low, So I'd say something like an Idaho, as long as there's no state income tax. The state income tax in California pushing 14%.
Oh my
Just
God.
terrible.
Greg,
Just ugly.
how about you,
Huh?
Greg? Where would you go?
I don't know. I'm pretty happy sitting here in Glendale, California, where I'm at, right next to city of Los Angeles. I'm close to Burbank Airport, but I can't fly anywhere. If I wanted to fly to New York, I understand I'm not allowed to come to New York without being quarantined. So I don't
Yeah,
know.
for 14 days. That's right. That's right.
I'll tell you,
Yeah.
I'll tell you the one place I don't want to go, Seattle, which is a
Oh
beautiful
my
city,
God.
or
Oh,
Portland,
God.
which is a beautiful city, but they got some ugly people up there. Those, what they're doing to their law enforcement and their fellow citizens, shame on both those cities. Shame on their leaders, their mayors and their city councils. They're worthless.
Yeah.
Worthless.
But Steve, the electorate is electing some of these people. You know what I mean? What
I
does that
don't
say about the
know.
electorate?
They must all be smoking dope or doing something, because I can't imagine there are that many stupid asinine people among the electorate, even in those two cities.
Well,
I don't
Well,
know.
look, they elected De Blasio twice.
yeah.
They,
Well-
you know, I guess they loved him so much they elected him again. And you know what's scary? You know who? If De Blasio is recalled, there's a guy named Jumaane Williams that would become the mayor. That guy's just as bad or worse than De Blasio.
Well, I find that hard to believe, but if you say so, I believe it.
History in the next election.
Seattle,
Well, I don't know. Are the New Yorkers into self-flagellation and guilt so much that they re-elect a guy like De Blasio?
Yeah,
Or
well, obviously, yes, they did. They reelected.
do you guys have term limits back there for mayor?
Yes, he has like,
Oh,
I think he has 15 months left.
well, you can probably survive him, but boy, what a loser.
Yeah.
He'll get worse as he goes out. I mean,
Oh, thanks,
one
Steve.
question in my, by the way, in Seattle, I think they're probably drinking too much coffee. They're famous for it and it's gone to their brains.
I
Maybe
think
that's the
I
problem.
think it's,
But one
I
thing,
think it's wanna-
yeah,
we-
and a
we
lot
were mad.
of people are moving. A lot of people are moving from California to Arizona and Texas. I know that. I know I have several friends that have done that actually fairly recently. But one question that's in my mind about this diaphragm law in New York City, where you can't, put your knee or anything on the back of the suspect while they're resisting and you're trying to handcuff them, is can the police associations, the unions, whatever you call them back there, are they able to take that to court and fight it? Because I'll tell you, that is
they're going to
so
try.
out to lunch.
They're certainly going to try, but I don't know what their legal standing is to file.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I just cannot conceive of how you would subdue somebody without being able to put your knee on your back while you're handcuffing them.
There is no.
Sure, you don't leave the knee on the back forever, wait on the back forever. You don't put the knee on the neck and hold them down for 8.5 minutes like the
Right.
tragedy in Minneapolis. Every cop I know thought that was wrong. I mean, the unions and management all say, okay, that was wrong. And of course, that's the incident the last couple of months that set off this whole conversation. But frankly, if it wasn't that incident, it would be something else. The tensions were getting ready to boil over. But some of this reaction, the anti-police reaction and restricting the police and tactics reaction is not well thought out and is literally dangerous. Yes, we've got to find ways to get rid of problem officers if they're not fixable. Yes, we've got to find ways in states that have officers going from one job to another without their history following them. Yeah, that's got to be fixed. Yeah, there's too many arbitrators and civil service commissions. When a chief or a sheriff fires somebody for good reason, they overturn it and put the guy back to work on the public payroll. And yeah, there's ways to fix those things. But defunding the police, I don't know about that. Sure, maybe we don't need to go to as many mental health calls. Who's going to go to those? But guess what? They're going to get hurt,
Yes.
Yeah. Homeless calls.
Yeah.
We never wanted to handle the homeless situation anyway. It got dumped on the police. But, the homeless people, at least in Los Angeles, we have a whole lot of the murders in Los Angeles are homeless people knifing each other to death.
Right.
So who's going to go handle that if it's not the police?
Well, you know how that's going to go down. It's going to be a radio call that's, the sector car is going to deem it nonviolent. And then they're going to call the EDP car, which brings the clinician or the social worker there. And then they're going to hand it off. How many of those cases do you actually have?
Yeah, and then when it goes south, because they send the wrong people there, they're going to sue the cops for not showing up.
Yeah.
They can't win for losing.
Well, the cops will. My idea is that the cops will show up first, and then once they deem it's nonviolent, then they'll call this. I call it the EDP car.
Well,
They'll call it.
that makes sense. That makes sense. They can evaluate it, make a judgment, call in the mental health people, and the cops can move on to the next call that requires your skill set.
Yeah, that's the idea. I mean, I'm part of a program that I do some. I'm an actor as well, and it's about how to handle mental illness. So they get a 3-part training there. They get the lectures, then they get scenarios, which I act in. And then the idea was that you would put a clinician would go out to these calls. So a lot of these ideas have been in the works, in the makings for a long time. It's not new. But the problem is, I guess that third part never got implemented because I guess they were trying to figure out like who's liable. I can only imagine they're trying to figure out who's liable. God forbid something happens. What else could
Something
be?
like
But that was the idea. So a lot of these programs about alleviating the police of some of their duties have been something that's been in the works for a while. They just never go to the final phase and actually do it.
Because nobody wants to spend the money.
No, but something. No matter how much training you have, with the rules and the police following these tactics that the city council is saying, specifically the diaphragm law, you can train a guy till the cows come home. No one's going to be able to get someone cuffed that doesn't want to be cuffed with that diaphragm law.
And then
I think they should call the city council when they get some jailhouse jack just got out of prison and he doesn't want to be cuffed. Call the city council. Let them cuff him.
Well, since Greg, you were the captain of the police academy. I'm sure during your tenure there that you were approached by many, many companies that probably wanted to introduce you to some non-lethal weapons that maybe you could make part of the LAPD. And I see that no police department around the country has used like the bolo wrap or any one of these things that could apprehend people without actually putting your hands on them, or at least initially. And even if it's just like a stun gun or a phaser, like something from the future, we got nothing coming in. And our academy recruits are from all over the place now. So none of them are like physically fit, most of them anyway. Does your police academy get a water bottle with the recruit's name on it? Because that's what they're giving out in the police academy. You get your own water bottle with your name on it.
It's a kind of gentler academy,
Yeah, so they can't fight. They can't fight, and you give them nothing to defend themselves.
Yeah. Looking for better equipment to test. In fact, the bolo wrap is out there at LAPD right now for I think a 6-month trial period. I'm kind of anxiously awaiting the results. I saw the bolo wrap training and demonstration at a seminar, a use of force seminar up in Las Vegas a few months ago. And so I'm waiting to see, how practical that is. It looks like it's got some potential, but the tasers properly used are very effective. Sometimes they're overused. We got to guard against that. But ultimately, and I've been saying for 40 years now, I guess, what we really, even the inventor of taser, rest in peace, Jack Cover, said, yeah. But I don't know that anybody's doing the research and development, or if it's even feasible within our lifetime to get there, wireless, and you can make it a death ray or just a knockdown ray. Just, like they said, put it on stun, Scotty, in the Star Trek TV series and all that. But the technology is going to improve as time goes on. It always does. But I'm afraid we're in a situation now, more than in any time in my time in law enforcement, which is 44 years now, 30 active, 14 retired, that our officers are really in danger out there from attacks, emboldened by all of these demonstrations and anti-police talk in the media and all that. And so that's why I really think these books that Steve Cooley and Bob Shern wrote, Blue Lives Matter and Blue Lives in Jeopardy, and the forthcoming book, probably next year, Blue Lives Shootouts, that they will save lives if people read them and learn the lesson.
Hey, Steve, where can we find these books?
To be learned.
Well, you
there
can get it on, the websites are Blue Lives
about
Matter.
how these officers are going.
book.com. And then
Okay.
the other website is Blue Lives Blue Lives in Jeopardy book.com. But Amazon sells them, and they're in all the bookstores too.
Steve, you don't know what to ask you. There's been research done about the type of officer. They'll call the one officer the civil servant, and they'll call the other officer the warrior. And
Yeah, if you just,
they always find out in most police encounters, the officer is most apt to die in a encounter with the public is a community policing type officer who's nice guy, is looking to talk to people and is friendly, whereas the warrior is more concerned with tactics, protecting himself, and he has that kind of mentality and not that community policing mentality.
Well, probably good to have both of them working
yeah,
together.
it's
I'll leave that one to
it-
Greg.
no, what Bill's saying is right. It's been proven by research for many years that it's everybody says the nice guy. It's the nice guy that's really overrepresented in the fatality statistics. But whether you're the nice guy or the tough guy, you need to learn the lessons and use the tactics that are going to save your life. The situational awareness and your positioning and your communications, and one of the most important things that gets officers hurt or gets them into questionable shootings and uses of force is rushing into a situation, a rush in where you don't really need to rush in.
Right.
Most situations you don't need to rush in. Some you do. If somebody's in jeopardy and you got to rush in and save their life or prevent them from getting beaten up, okay, you got to rush in. I get that. But most situations, there's time for you to keep your distance, keep your cover, observe what's going on, radio in, get more units, get a supervisor, get a taser, get a beanbag shotgun. Whatever, before you rush in. That one awareness of that one fact would save a lot of guys a lot of trouble and a lot of lawsuits, as well as injuries or even death.
Right. One of the big problems with that is also that police departments are losing a lot of their highly experienced officers because of the climate right now. As soon as they get 20 years, they're jumping off the job. They're like, I'm not risking my pension to put everything on the line for this job that doesn't give a shit about me. Guys are running, they are sprinting to the pension section in New York City. sprinting, and I don't blame them. I don't blame them at all.
And you combine that, and you combine that with the difficulty they're going to have in recruiting, which has already pre-existed the current crap for the last month and a half. Recruiting was tough. Agencies couldn't get good qualified candidates. Now things are even worse.
Right.
After people watch on TV what's been going on, so you got people leaving early, sprinting away. No one wants to come in. This is not a good scenario.
No, and then they want you to get your own liability insurance now because they want to take away qualified immunity. Brilliant.
That is
Brilliant.
none of your fruitcake. Whoever's come up with that idea does not understand the dynamics of the law and how it works, and how in the United States of America you can file any kind of lawsuit you want. And what you say in your complaint or your allegation, your legal paperwork, you can lie because you're protected by litigation privilege. So you can file your lawsuit, but then the poor officer has no real protection with qualified immunity that the courts would otherwise give him. It is a recipe for disaster. Recipe for disaster.
Just when you think it can't get any worse, they add one more thing,
Yeah, I know. It's amazing.
I have a very hard time understanding this take away qualified immunity argument from my point of view and the work that I do as a consultant and expert witness. The media keeps telling you, because the activists and the takeaway people keep telling you, oh yeah, well, qualified immunity means that you can't sue the cops. I go, well, that's interesting. I've done over 300 cases where the cops get sued. So what does that mean? I mean, it's the argument is founded on a lie. Of course you can sue the cops. Anybody can sue anybody.
Yeah, it's a standard whereby the court can determine that is functionally a frivolous lawsuit according to the law and experience. That's all it is. It provides that protection during the course of the proceedings.
Well, we reached that point where we're going to close. I guess we're going to wrap it up here. We wanted to thank you guys for coming in. So I wanted to talk about the books one more time, if we could show them, Greg.
Sure.
There's 2 books that are part of the series. There's another one coming out, Blue Lives in Jeopardy and Blue Lives Matter in the Line of Duty. And Steve Cooley is one of the authors. Greg Meyer is one of the experts. And they're fantastic books. I can't wait. I know you're sending them to Bill, but I hope you're sending me one too.
Yeah, well, you know what? Email me your address, or Bill could just share it with you.
We can read it together.
Yeah.
When we hang out.
Well, you'll enjoy the book.
This was a fantastic opportunity for us to get our, to spread out, to head all the way over to the West Coast and talk to 2 experts, guys who have done it. That's what our show is known for. It's about people always admire the guests that we have, and we did it again. Bill always does it. Bill gets the guests. Most of them, our producer Pam gets the guests for us too. But this was fantastic, man. Thank you guys for being part of our show.
Okay, let's do it again, you guys.
And
Steve,
before you guys go,
I just wanted to ask you, like, in closing, and this could be for, hope you didn't run away. Steve, I just wanted to ask you in closing, and this goes for both of you. What happens now? What is law enforcement's future now? Is it doomed? Are the cities going to become so dangerous that they're going to force these nutcase politicians out, and they're going to go back and reverse these crazy laws that they're trying to make? I mean, what happens?
Well, I think the pendulum. Well, go ahead, Greg. Go ahead.
I say it's the pendulum is just swinging the wrong way right now. Probably harder and worse than Steve and I have seen it in our lifetimes and career. It's going to have to swing back. I don't know when. I don't know what that's going to look like. But crime is going rapidly up. Violent crime is going rapidly up. And the public's not going to stand for that long. I know your audience is probably mostly cops.
Yes.
Anybody that's ever been a cop knows that Black Lives Matter. We're the ones that are there 24/7 to try to protect those lives. And
For
the
sure.
Hispanic lives, and the Asian lives, and the American Indian lives, and dare I say it, the white lives. It's like we're there trying to protect and serve in the community. I have a clip from when George Floyd's brother, after the tragic death in Minneapolis, testified in the House Judiciary Committee about the tragic loss of his brother. And he said these words, I have them committed to memory. He said, "My brother's life mattered. All our lives matter. Black lives matter." Nobody's going to call George Floyd's brother a racist for saying that all lives matter, but that's where we're at in this country with some people. They don't get it, that cops are the ones that are out there in those communities 24/7 trying to save everybody's lives, including Black lives. And right now, we're cutting these officers off at the pass. Violent crime is going up. We're going to a very bad place for a while. I hope not forever, but for a while we are.
That's,
And I want to say one more thing about the books. The public and the media don't seem to understand the facts of life and death on the street that confront our officers every day and every night. But many officers who are now dead in their graves, they know the dangers, and it's too late. And we have to learn from them. Remember, we need to learn the lessons so that we can protect future officers' lives. And that's what Steve Cooley's books are all about. I recommend them.
Steve,
Thanks,
final
Greg.
words?
well, I think just remember that one word, pendulum. It does swing. Hopefully it'll swing back. And it's got a lot of swinging to do up in Seattle, Philadelphia, Portland, and maybe if we get the wrong DA in LA County, we're going to do a little pendulum swinging down here. But there are great places in the United States of America where things aren't out of control. There are places like Nebraska, Idaho, South Dakota. I don't know. It's not all lost, but there's a lot of improvement that can be made in certain of our municipal areas. Minnesota started this mess and it spread like a wildfire. And I think we're going to have to deal with it, recognize that it is a force, and then defeat it because it is an evil force.
Yes, it is. Certainly.
All righty. So there you have it. On behalf of Police Off the Cuff, and Steve, I wrote that Idaho, Nebraska. What was
South Dakota?
South Dakota.
Dakota.
All right. And Arizona, I remember earlier.
It's too hot. Too hot.
And do they tax your pension there? I don't know.
Got to look all these stuff up. So not only do we talk about law enforcement, we also give people great real estate advice on where to move to right now. All right. So on behalf of Police Off the Cuff, I just want to thank you guys. Steve, Greg, you guys were a pleasure. Good luck with the books. We'll keep promoting them. Bill, this was a great episode, man.
Thank you guys for coming on the show. Thanks, Steve.
Okay, very good. All right. Be on the lookout for those books, Mark. They're in the